right. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dan Gerstein. I'm working on Free Stars, Children of Infinity, sequel to the Urquan Masters at Pistol Shrimp. And I'd like to introduce some special guests and also Fred.
Yeah, I'm Fred Ford. I've worked on the original Urquan Masters, and I actually worked contemporaneously with our honored guest Chris today. Although we didn't actually meet at the time, but we both toiled for accolade.
Yeah, so I'm Chris Taylor. I've been doing the game design thing for many decades, and it's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you guys and have some fun and reminisce and all sorts of fun things.
Well,
Fun is overrated. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say, wait, we didn't agree to fun. Hang on. Well, speaking of fun, there's this game, and you said you do it, and we call it the Urquan Masters. So I'm just curious, like, was that your idea of fun? No, but seriously, how did you find the Urquan Masters? What was your experience of that game?
Well, back during the time frame when PC games were coming out, like Urquan Masters, there was a lot every week that we were playing, and we tried to play a little bit of everything. But we were like kind of like going through games that back then pretty quickly because I was working, I was making a game. People would say to me, like, what are you doing all day long? And are you playing games? Isn't that what you do when you're a game developer? Aren't you just playing games all day long? Have we heard, you guys have heard this, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, you must have me confused with someone else who
Yeah.
because we're actually working
Yeah.
on games, so we don't have a whole lot of time to play them. But of course, in my heart, Urquan Masters was the great, a sequel to one of my favorite games. And your name, Fred, and Paul Ritchie are the two names that, of course, I had emboldened in my head. And then when I was at I'm sorry, I'm rambling, Game Developer Conference, I was reading badges. This is true story. Going, where's Paul Ritchie? Where's Fred Ford? I want to meet them in person. And I found Greg Johnson. And I was like, okay. And then of course I was like a little fanboy with Greg Johnson because of Toe Jam and Earl. And those are just great times. All of the games you guys produced and the great memories. So yeah, Urquan Masters. Yeah, and now I'm hearing in the green room of this thing that we've got something coming up here, a sequel. Is this tell I'm dying. I'm dying
Toe
to find
Jam and
out
Masters, it's called.
Yeah.
what's it called.
No,
Oh, that
the
was a
The
joke.
Toe
Okay.
Jam Masters? I'm
Toe
I'm
Jam
down.
Masters.
Hey, where do I send my money? I am buying everything that you and Paul and Greg and Dan, who I'm getting to know formally on this call. Actually, sorry, Dan, because
Okay.
I wasn't a Toys with Bob player, or sorry, why
Yeah.
am I blank?
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I getting that right?
Skylanders.
Yeah, that's right. I
Skylanders.
was trying to think of
Yeah.
the actual game. I was trying
Yeah.
to think of the game. I never did. Um, so I'm getting to know Dan here, but I'm really excited about what you guys are working on.
Yeah, well, gosh, that was all the way into the past and now into the future. That's like a lot of time to cover. It's like, where do we start? So, Fred, if you want to jump in, but I just wanted to say real quick, just I think a lot of people know my experiences, but I also had an experience with the Genesis version, and people know this story, but my first experience was I didn't know there was a story at all, and I didn't know there was a first game and a second game or anything like that. I was just
Right.
playing the Genesis version, Super Melee, for hours because I was a kid. Okay, just to be clear, I was like 6 years old. So yeah, I didn't have any money. I don't, whatever. I just play anything anybody would put in front of me. And I would play at this place in Novato, California called the On-Ramp. The
Mm.
On-Ramp was run by Diane Asher, who is Robert Leyland's wife. Robert Leyland worked on the Urquan Masters and Toe Jam and Earl. And so there was this little like I I I don't want to call it a breeding ground, but that's really what it felt like. And so
Mm.
even though in the green room I was joking, like from the from the cradle to Toys for Bob, I was programmed from a young age playing Toe Jam and Earl and playing the Urquan Masters with my friends, and I didn't even know the people who were involved with it. Somehow I got involved, and then years later I met Paul and Fred, and it all came together. So I also had a similar, like, I wasn't looking for badges, it was the other way around. They were just like brainwashing me through the games. So then I grew up and started working with them.
And
I
you
have
know,
yet
oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I have yet to meet Paul Ritchie and Fred Ford in person. Okay. That is still out there for it to happen. I hope it happens.
Yeah, for sure. We don't often go to the game developers conferences anymore. As you know, back in the day, there were like 25 people there, and
Oh yeah.
now there's 10 times to 100 times that many. uh,
Oh yeah.
but
That Chris Crawford, his living room. I never got in on that ground floor. Were you at Chris Crawford's living
I
room?
I was never at his living room. No.
That's the stuff of ancient lore now.
Yeah, but Greg Johnson. He worked on Urquan Masters, or maybe you don't.
I
Um,
believe that was in the back of my brain, but you know what? I mean, I get to start to call senility into as a witness, right? Like, I mean, having a photographic memory for everything that happened over the last 40 years is might be asking a lot, but I knew Greg. See, I had this thing that Greg was in there. I would see Greg's name and your name and Paul's name, and
yeah, well,
they were,
Paul did a
yeah,
little bit of work on Starflight as
right.
well, and Greg returned the favor. And he was also one of our biggest play testers of at least Super Melee. He and Paul would play every day, and um, and that's where Robert was working too. Uh, you may have heard the gravity whip in Melee called the Leyland gravity whip. That's because Robert pioneered that in our play tests. Um,
That's great. That's
but
great.
yeah, Greg Johnson is a brilliant designer. Brilliant designer.
Yeah, I could talk. He could just, we could talk about him for the rest of this time together. He's one of my favorite guys. He's got a heart of gold, solid gold.
Yeah,
You'll seldom meet a guy who's more genuine human being than Greg.
yeah,
So shout out to Greg.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And
We were not shy about it. We like him too. Don't worry.
stealing
Yeah.
his
Oh
heart
yeah.
is
Oh yeah.
high on my list.
Yeah. I've got his he did a Kickstarter for out of your shell. So of course I got that, and I have it on my shelf here.
Yeah,
So yeah,
well,
yeah, yeah.
so I mean, I know you want to ask us. You asked us about the future, so I wanted to jump in and answer
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But then
please.
I also want to go back to the past because we have a rare gathering of what's the polite way to say? I don't ancient minds, no.
Oh,
Well,
you're close.
wise, seasoned, experienced,
Oh
Godlike.
yeah.
deific creatures here, and then me. But what we're working on now is really, I guess the tagline says it all. The rest we're kind of trying to keep a little bit secret because we want to keep some
Mhm.
spoilers under the wraps. But it's not called the Urquan Masters, but it is the sequel to the Urquan Masters,
I see.
and it is a return to the universe. And it's very much, one of the things that I guess we feel looking around is there's been so many, I mean, there's so many games now, but there's so many science fiction games, and there's a lot of games that I think have we think have legacy, that carries forth from Urquan Masters. And I didn't work on it, so I can talk, with lots of praise about it and without sounding big-headed. But there's, these games like Mass Effect and FTL that have echoes of it. And there's this whole
Mhm.
science fiction
Mhm.
game genre out there, and it's great to see it flourish. And so for us, looking at the Urquan Masters and kind of like in modern light, it's like, you know what? This game actually still holds up really well. And what if we just took some of the things that it did well and did them, because we're missing like a very story driven science fiction game that has this very abstract kind of gameplay that's much more arcadey and not necessarily focused on realism, and has kind of the whimsy and charm and I don't want to call it alienness because aliens can be interpreted a lot of ways, but the sort of diversity, I would say, of the
Mhm.
Oracle Masters. So that's kind of what we're working on with the new one. We've been, gosh, Fred, was it two and a half years since Pistol Shrimp was formed? Yeah, I think something like that. A little over 2.5 years since Pistol Shrimp was formed. So that's the officially, as Fred would call it, form Voltron and actually bring everybody together. We had 4 of us all working on it. We finished our pre-production. We're in production now, and we're kind of seeing it through at this point. So
Wow.
that's the extremely high level version of what we're doing now. And we're really just, we have this great community. We have a lot of people supporting us. We have old fans who know the game. We have, you know, people like me who didn't discover it until they got older. They thought, oh, I thought this is just a combat simulator. Wait, there's a story, you know. And then we have people who are coming in. We have people who know about Skylanders or whatever, and like, that's cool. And all of a sudden they realize there's this old game that we worked on. So there's this kind of diaspora of people in our community coming in and being part of supporting the project. And we're pretty open about what we're doing and sharing what we're doing with everyone. So it's we're independent too, and that's another nice thing. We can share our work. There isn't a publisher or investor kind of looking to make sure we're, you know, we're on track, and we can't share that's secret, and we can share this, that's public. And so there's a lot of I don't know, designing our own fate. Fred's been on a much longer career track. Mine was under corporate control forever. So I don't really know what independent was like, unless you want to talk like making mods in high school when I didn't have a job.
I'm
But
curious.
that's what we're doing.
That's awesome. I'm so happy for you guys that you got the band back together, or you know, whatever, however you want to couch it. What did you say? You had actually a word for it.
Voltron.
Yeah.
But you said something there which was made me wonder, Fred, when did you first start writing game code? You must have been young.
Well, if you count high school, 1974.
What?
If you count like the first game I published, it would have been 81.
Right. Shit. Yeah. Yeah. See, I got my first computer in 1980, but I didn't start working on Hardball 2 until May of 88. So I'm way downstream from where you got on. So I should be listening and not talking.
Yeah. See,
talk about
underneath my hat, there's a Voldemort face on the other side.
No, you got to show. You got the hoodie. You know, we have to do the Dark Emperor. Yeah, that's what we usually get. Hang on, this is a real like running joke too.
This is real stuff.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah.
Where are your rebel friends now, young Skywalker?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, he's paid dearly for his powers, but you know what? It's given him access to all of these things, so it's worth it, I guess. But you know, I am curious because you said, well, you were talking about how you got started. Like, seriously, how did you get started? Were you slurped into it by accident like I was? Were you trying to be a game developer? Where did you get your start?
Yeah, so my story is I was playing with a friend. Oh God, you can go back until it's irrelevant, but the seed of the idea was PCs came on this home computers. A friend had his friend's sister's husband had a Commodore PET, and I got over to their house and I saw it. Make the story quick, and I was like, this is amazing. This is the most amazing thing. And I said to my dad, you know, my parents are divorced. My dad's raising us 2 kids with his, you know, sort of a stepmother kind of figure in our life. And I was begging him for a computer. This is 1980. So the fall of 1980, he gets me this TRS-80 from Radio Shack. It didn't have the colors of Apple II. It didn't have all that stuff, but I didn't care. And I started writing a code in BASIC, and then I immediately announced, you know, to anyone who would listen, that I'm going to make video games for a living. That's going to be my career. That's going to be my profession. 14-year-old kid who couldn't find his ass with both hands, you know, technically didn't know what ASCII code was, or didn't know what, you know, 2's complement arithmetic was, and I was going to make games. And my father, of course, looks at me like, yeah, well, you might as well just go join the circus, you know, at this point. You know what I mean? Like, you're nuts. And so I finally pursued it and got a job working at a little company called Distinctive Software in Burnaby, led by Don Matrick. Of course, the guy who started that company around a game called Evolution, and then Test Drive. And then I got that job, and I got my first professional job in May of 88, working on Hardball 2, the sequel to Hardball, which was a big deal. Hardball was a big deal by Bob Whitehead. On the Commodore 64, he created this baseball game called Hardball, and it was a big hit for Accolade, and so they wanted a sequel. So the irony is Canadians don't play a lot of baseball. We do hockey, we're soccer, we're a lot of things, even lacrosse, but baseball wasn't really one of them. So I was like, oh, I don't, you know, so I dove in, rolled up my sleeves. Oh, and here it is, because I was showing it to you earlier. Here's the actual original Hardball. See, it's almost like I had this set up, but not intentionally.
I remember
And
Bob, by the way.
what's that?
I've met Bob for sure at Accolade.
Oh, Bob Whitehead. You met Bob Whitehead. I
Yeah.
never knew what he thought of this. I never
Yeah.
ever found out what Bob Whitehead thought of the sequel. Not weird.
Yeah.
Where are you, Bob?
Maybe he'll watch this and then we finally get a memo.
Oh, I would love to talk to Bob Whitehead. If Bob Whitehead was alive and well and out there and you know what I mean? And healthy and wanted to waste an hour with me, I would love that. I might even fly to Bob's city and go for coffee. Say, just tell me where you are. I'll come have coffee with you. I threaten people with that all the time, and they're like, no, don't come to my city. But
If you're talking about Game Developers Conference in the Green Room, if you ever come to San Francisco, that's my city, and you're welcome to visit anytime. I would love to
thank you
see
so
it.
much.
I'm not a GDC goer that much these days, but I literally live up the street from it. So
Nice of
Oh,
you
that's
to
great.
let him go to San Francisco, Dan.
let him. I'm trying to protect. I'm trying to protect Bob Whitehead.
Yeah.
If you guys are going to go to GDC in what is it, April or March or April, somewhere
March
around there.
somewhere, I think. Yeah.
Well, we're always on call. If we don't actually go, we're so close that
We
we
live
can
here.
meet
Yeah.
people who are there.
Right? Are you still in the Novato area?
I am. He's in San Francisco. Yeah.
Isn't Novato famous for being the original location of ILM?
Close. Yeah.
Oh, close. Okay.
It's just a couple exits down.
I'm betting there's some folks watching this right now that don't know what ILM is. Another TLA that might need exposition.
What's a TLA? That's good.
We just go down the rabbit
It's
hole.
very meta. Yeah, yeah. I I'll share a brief story about this, which because I grew up in Nevada, and my dad would always tell me how he and if you're ever watching this, I adore you and I love your stories and they live in my head forever. Just want to get that out of the way. So if everything sounds sort of like I'm teasing, it's because the stories are funny to me, and he has a lot. So he would tell me repeatedly while I was growing up. Well, one, he actually worked with Lucasfilm and actually worked on the Star Wars films. He programmed circuit boards and did some work for like the camera that did the hyperspace transition thing or whatever. So he was a huge fan of technology and all that stuff. And I grew up like he was a huge influence on me. I was very much steeped in that. But he would always tell me like he and his hippie friends back when they moved to California, they lived in Berkeley or something. They talked about how Lucas Ranch and Lucas Valley, the whole area, Skywalker Ranch rather, they could have had it if they had just raised $10,000 between him and his hippie friends. They could have just bought that land. And what were they going to do with it? Just go live and like start a like co-op, like a bunch of hippies. And it's just funny thinking about it. Like, well, yeah, it became ILM and like they did Star Wars. My dad could have single-handedly stopped Star Wars, or I guess him and his hippie friends. So that's a very butterfly effect story. So, but back to your question.
I like the shout out though to your dad. That's great. Dads need more shout outs, especially when we're, like I want to throw a shout out to my dad for getting me that first computer, because without it, it wouldn't have launched my career in gaming. I mean, this is what dads do. They open doors, they support us. They may not love that we're going to go up and become flaky, artistic game developer nerds, and they're like, oh, why can't he get a real job and be a welder or a truck driver? Why does he have to go off and do crazy shit with computers? And I'm sorry, but he opened the door and I went through it.
Well, my dad actually worked with computers too, for the government on top secret spy satellites. And at one point we were comparing careers, and this was when he was almost retiring in his 80s, I think. And he wanted to compare what our daily experience was, and I said, or just our work experience. And I said, well, I work on games and it takes a year plus to finish them. And then this was before online games were just forever games that you update forever. And I
Right.
said, you work on them for a year or two, and then they're out the door and you can move on to the next one. And he said, I've worked on the same piece of software now for 30 some odd years, he said. And I said, wow, how do you make that fresh every day? And he thought about it for a while because he couldn't really tell me much, but he said, well, they make new kinds of satellites. So I, I have to adjust for that. The and the people, they want to know different things occasionally. So that was all he could tell me.
Funny, because this was some secret satellite shit going on.
Yeah, and he worked for a company called General Research Corporation. If that isn't
Not
a
suspicious at all.
front for the CIA, I don't know what it is. But
That's that's good. That's good. I
Yeah.
like that.
So
Yeah.
we all can blame our, at least it sounds like we can all blame our fathers for getting us into this. Thanks, dads, all of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really appreciate it. You made a monster.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too because gaming really sounds good on the outside. I mean, on the outside looking in, essentially it sounds like you're just screwing around all day long and you really shouldn't be paid. I actually did have very large stretches of time when I felt like I shouldn't be paid because I was having a lot of fun. But when I started Gas Powered Games and I had payroll and there were lawyers and accountants and contracts, all the fun started to slowly leave the
yeah,
process of game making. To be fair, for those people who thought it was all a good time, it was actually more fun to be an employee, ironically, even though you traded control for happiness in a sense, right? Like there was that back and forth. So I don't know. I have gaming is a hobby for me now. For anyone who doesn't know, I have a site called Kanugi.com and I'm slowly working on it. And I release little updates. I got my first piece of hate mail. This is fun. I got my first piece of hate mail where somebody said they really like dug in, eh? Like they really trolled me out. They're like, God damn, man, like you've been working on this thing forever. Just stop messing around and get the damn thing done. What are you doing, you piece of like, come on. And I was like, you know what I wrote back? Because I thought it was awesome. I said, I love this sort of objective feedback. I was like, I appreciate it. I find that it motivates me, to hear your honest, unvarnished perspective. So please write me more, write me again. Don't forget about me. Check in with me often. And I didn't hear back. But I'm excited for the next installment from that particular person who's going to chew me out because I'm sure it's going to take me a long time to get anything done. Because I have a lot of hobbies and I get distracted easily, and I'm raising two teenage boys that take priority.
I can
And
fill in if you want some hate mail. I mean, like I don't have a lot of hate in me, but if you give me a persona to work with, I can I
yeah.
enjoy the challenge.
So I don't know. I mean, I was just rambling, but I'm basically saying, right? There's no investors. There's no publisher. You were talking about this, right? There's a freedom, but there is something to be said about if someone doesn't have a fire lit under your ass, you can take a lot longer to produce things. It's a truth. It's a truth.
yes,
So a little bit of fire, a candle or something might be the right amount of fire, but I like it this way. I would prefer this way. I don't like cranking out games with an executive telling you that you need to make the quarter because you've got to, do the incremental launch of, X game. It just that really was the killer when gaming companies were publicly traded, that you have shareholders and quarterly earnings. The fun probably died the most in that during that time, which was I'd say the mid to late 90s is when that started to happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then the whole microtransaction thing.
Live service games in general, although I
Yeah,
think people are starting to rebel against those in some ways, but that's just maybe my it's my bias. But I also think for me too, I was born in 1984. So, the joy hadn't been sucked out of me as a human being yet, just in general. I had the like wide-eyed thing, and I still couldn't believe the first paycheck I got from Toys for Bob for doing like a robot in Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure. That was my first actual paid contribution to a project. So there's also something about like, I don't want to say growing older makes you world weary. It's more like you get a better understanding of what you like. And like I can sign up for this because I know what's involved and I know what it's going to take. And you bring up like lawyers and accountants, and it's like when you're young, you don't know any better. And that's an asset, really. I mean, not to exploit young people, but it's like as a young person, you don't know what it's going to take. So you have the candle lit under you, but it feels really hot and you're just going to go do it because you don't know any better. Then you get older and you're like, well, I've learned a little bit more about myself and I know the things that I like and I want to be more selective, and you become just picky because you've had experience. And experience, it's not a negative. I'm very grateful. I don't want to go back to like 21-year-old me when I pulled all-nighters repeatedly to like work on games. But if you asked me if I was having fun, I would have said yes. And like that
Yeah.
was my idea of a good time. If you ask me now, is that my idea of a good time? I'd say no.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like all the fun got sucked out of it completely. It didn't go to zero. It just wasn't as, I don't know, it wasn't as romantic, for lack of a better word. There was a romance to it. There was something special when I was reading about Paul and Fred and Greg. These guys were like these amazing. They were these. It was like watching Burt Reynolds and in Cannonball Run or something. You know what I mean? It was like, oh my God, these guys are on another planet. They're a world away from me. And then you get into it and you realize, oh damn it, the world is a business, and you got to treat it like a business. You can't just be a bunch of. We've seen what happens with developers. I'm not going to mention any names. It'll all come out in my book, but which I'm
Are
going to
you
write.
working on a book? Seriously?
I'm going to write the ultimate tell-all book. So
Okay.
if I'd mysteriously disappear in like some weird, like a combine harvester accident or something, you will know that someone doesn't want that book to be released. Okay. Because I'm going to tell all before I die, and it's going to be a great read. So I hope you guys stick around for that. But what was I even saying? Oh,
Meanwhile, I'm ordering a combine. Yeah.
oh yeah.
how meeting these amazing figures like Fred Ford, it was so wonderful and romantic. And then when you actually meet him, it's actually not that good.
Yeah. When you actually meet me, it's
No, this is great. I was kind of tired. Let me be super transparent. I like say whatever I think. People say I'm famous for we never wonder what Chris is thinking. Like, I don't know whether that's good or bad. It's probably bad. If you had a gun to your head and you had to pick one, it's probably bad. But the truth is I was tired and the time came up for this call, and now I'm full of energy and I'm vibrating and I'm all excited and having fun. That's a real thing. That's a real thing that happens with human energy when it's a good thing, and you're having a fun time. So that's not every day.
Seriously. Well, I mean, that's really sweet. I feel the same way, but also what you were talking about, like bringing fun in. I mean, don't worry, the press raked Bobby Kotick over the coals for his taking the fun out of making games quote. So I don't need to do that, but that was sort of an infamous bit of thing that I had nothing to do with. I just remember it, as some of us do. And, just what you're talking about, like, well, we're running a business and we have a game to get done, and we have deadlines and we have schedules and all those things, which just in some ways don't sound fun. But what we're doing right now, which is, well, okay, yes, we can't just talk forever and do no work, but there is an amount of work and problem solving and sorting things out and joy and just the human connection and creating. And then it's like keeping the balance. I don't have the formula. There is no formula. And I think it's different for different people. Is like, I was talking to an artist last night who was working with us, and I told him something that I think he hadn't thought about before. And I don't mean to sound, this is not inflating myself. I'm just like, seriously, he hadn't thought about this, or it hadn't occurred to him. And I told him, you have, like, when you're doing this work, he's a huge fan of the Orquon Masters, right? And I told him, when you're doing this work, you realize someone's going to be making fan art of what you're making someday. And he's like, hang on, I have to process that. And so, so these days, like, this is part of my own personal growth, but I tend to relate making games to like live performance, which is you spend months and months rehearsing. You do all this work and it's sweat and labor and it's very technical and it's fun sometimes because you interact with people, but your eyes on the prize of the experience that someone's going to have sitting there in the audience for like an hour and a half or whatever. I love live performance on both sides of it, but the creative process and like talking to that artist and saying, it's going to be so fun because we're making a gift and we know how it was put together, and we see all the ugly parts and we know what's frustrating. And this morning, I was banging my head against the wall where I'm like, this should work. It should work. Why doesn't it work? That's just the day in, the day out of it. But at the end, the player's not going to experience any of that. They're going to experience the magic of how much fun we had making it. And I really believe this, which is if you're not having fun making the game, it's going to show. It's really hard to hide that. And just what you said about you can't hide what you're thinking. There is like games have a way of doing that too. This is just my opinion, but it's like that comes through, and I think people would say the same about me. Not only do I talk and ramble a lot, but don't worry, you'll know what I'm thinking all the time. There's no guessing. And I'm a terrible liar, or unless I'm a really good liar and I'm just putting up front. But
Unless you're
when you
crossing the
play,
border into Canada.
many Americans consider that sometimes. But I guess what I was saying is like when you think about the fun and like what makes this fun, and it's like, do I want to write a blog post to share with all the people waiting for the game about the realities of doing accounting, and is that going to be fun? You know what? In some ways I do, because I would like to share with them so that they learn about the process. Educating people is fun, but the thing is, that's my idea of fun. My idea of fun is explaining like, hey, here's how some scheduling stuff works. Isn't that neat? But being able to share it, especially we're so small, we're indie, we don't have a lot of people to talk to. Sharing with our community has been a way we've learned to, or I've learned at least, to have fun. And Fred's joined me for a lot of it too. And, Fred, I think made even admit to having fun, but learning how you're going to make it fun to have the process so that the fun comes through in the game for the like finished result for the players sitting there in their seat getting to have that joyous experience is important. You have to be aware of it, because if it's no fun, then not only are you not having fun doing it, but well, what's the end going to be like? How can you imagine that being fun?
I've never heard of a game that was no fun to make but was fun to play. I've never heard that. Like it's like a universal truth or something.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I've heard the opposite too. Like I've had lots of fun making games that haven't been reviewed well or whatever, but it's like all my experiences with that were positive. And like if I meet someone and they said they had fun with it, I go, cool. It's like I'm sure we've all been working on things for long enough, and I've never gotten hate mail. I do remember I've said this story to too many people, but I got my first bad review and they called out specifically work I'd done, and I put it up on the wall in my cubicle because I'm like, I'm so proud someone noticed me. 4.2 out of 10. Thanks, Game Informer. But the idea is like, hey, we have to have fun in the process. Like it's so important. And I think it's true of every creative work. There's the whole starving, suffering artist thing, but can a human really define what's fun? We're not very good at that.
So subjective. Yeah.
But
And there are things about the game development process that are just more fun than other things to do.
Yeah.
Make.
Oh, totally. The thing is, like, even talking about engineering, I think the fact that we get the end result of what we do. I remember I had a coworker I worked with, actually not in games, and he said like his only line for like the work he didn't want to do is he never wanted to be responsible for someone's physical safety. So like car systems, aviation, a missile that could actually hurt someone. He just didn't want to think about that. So he stayed in entertainment. And he never worked on games, but he worked in media, film, things like that. And I kind of think about that too. And it's like, well, the worst we can do to someone is bore them, but the best we can do is give them a really good time. And the fact that we get to have like an output, which is fun, is like very motivating and very special. So I'll say like, at least for me, one part, like I left games for a while and I thought I was done forever, but they pulled me back. One part that nobody else can say, I don't think, is that the core component is fun, and that's what you're aiming for. And all the work you're putting into is like, well, I want someone to have a good time. And that's pretty motivating for me. I don't know, like even with the lawyers, even with the accountants, I don't know what your experience has been with that too, Chris.
I'm just, the more you talk about Urquan, the sequel, Urquan, I'm curious, do you have a date yet, a street date? When, because now I'm getting like, and did you, I feel terrible asking because of course I'm all caught up in my own world. I'm working on my own thing. I'm working on Intergalactic Space Empire.
When are you going to be done?
No. Yeah.
Rock War, and we are kind of operating. I know what you're doing is going to be more rich. There's a richness. Okay,
that's a different type of game.
Yeah, mine is a sterile. The premise is we fight for. I don't know how much you guys are in. You guys probably know more than a lot of folks, but the formation of our solar system, and we have this asteroid belt. And this asteroid belt has elements from when the sun, a sun, not necessarily our sun, but probably a lot of it went back into our sun. There's all these physics, but minerals and things that get formed in the explosion of the sun that don't get formed in the actual fusion reaction of the sun, right? End up in these asteroids. So you know there's asteroids rumored to be full of solid gold out there in the asteroid belt, right? And now if you look at all the physics of retrieving big heavy objects and bringing them down to Earth, it's almost beyond no matter how much value there's in an asteroid, you'll never be able to bring it back down to the Earth. You'll get a pound of it or something. It'll cost you $1 billion and you'll get a pound of it. There's a lot of really fun and interesting things with I'm trying to think of the name for it. It's the whole principle of stuff I'm blanking, but regardless, the game is about the conquest of the asteroid belt. So it's a real-time strategy game where you're fighting over these resources. And we know, if we know anything at all, that humanity will fight over stuff. Okay. Especially when there's no flag on it. So I know there's going to come a time in the evolution of this planet where all the countries of the world that have space flight capabilities are going to be out putting their little flags on every single asteroid in the asteroid belt. And I just thought of it as rock war. We're fighting over the rocks. So that's the premise as a real-time strategy game.
Was gravity well the thing you were trying to come up with? Or?
Yeah, it's like that. It's the physics of retrograde. I'll remember it here probably before the end of this. Prograde, retrograde, where you have to when things slow down, they go faster. When you accelerate them, they go on a larger thing. So if you went and grabbed an asteroid and you wanted to bring it to Earth and you want to crash it into the Earth, like you didn't actually want to create a extinction event, right? You'd have to figure out a way to retrograde it. So you'd have to slow all that massive amount of energy that it has orbiting. So it's there's a name for it. Whoever's watching right now is screaming at their monitor right now going, idiot. It's called
I can't believe these people are working on space games. They don't even know this.
Maybe delete this whole section.
No, we're going to keep this. This is one of the morals we give to our community and even to the people working on it, which is like, it actually, some of this stuff only matters at a certain point when it matters. If you're able to move forward and have fun without being official or coming up with a real physical explanation for how it works, doesn't matter. If it's fun and it inspires you, go do it.
I've had it in my head for years. I've been working on this thing for years, and I just can't remember it now. But by the way, I want to do a warning to all the young folks listening in right now that there's this thing called your memory just disappears on you and you don't get a notification. This isn't like Google notifying you that a service is being deprecated, okay? This is called something in your brain is gone and you don't know what it is that's missing, okay? Like, it's really interesting, okay, getting older. And then the shit that you did when you were 4 that you remember like it was yesterday, or at least clearly. And you're like, what an interesting decision my brain made to throw away some stuff that I'm going to need on Tuesday next week. But I know about a kid that I got sandwiches from in elementary school still, because, I like to eat a lot, apparently. So,
well, it's really, this important scientific information that we can use right now is hardly relevant compared to the years and years of trauma, I experienced. So it's just clearly, a prioritization scheme.
I just remembered. It's called orbital mechanics.
Oh, okay.
Oh, what a relief. I feel like I'm just like, woo! I'm so warm. Do you guys mind if I take my shirt off? Oh.
I thought you had a gag going on. I thought there was something different was about that.
There is. So a few minutes later, he'll say it again, and he'll have another shirt under.
Or is it like the whole?
I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed from not remembering orbital mechanics. I got this flush of heat, and I thought I have to take my shirt off. I have to cool off.
Your own shirt, orbital mechanics. It's like I have to reduce the energy.
Yeah. Yeah, so for all of those folks out there who think that all these space shows where you have the Enterprise or other ships, that you just fly around like it was
Yeah.
just all whatever.
Like Urquan Masters. Yeah, no.
Well, it's more fun than saying we're stuck in the gravity well of a planet. They did a little bit of it with the Picard maneuver, right? Like they got into orbital. You guys know about the Picard maneuver, right? Okay, may I? So
Yes,
That
they're
sounds
in a
please.
familiar.
situation, and the only way out is to fly directly at the sun, or whatever the sun is, the star.
Yeah.
I guess you want to be generic, right? At the star. And at the last minute, as you're flying towards the star, you move to the right just a little bit and you slingshot around in the gravity well of the sun, and you can escape out of the system, right? You can get away from the Klingons, or you can get away from the Romulans by doing this thing. And in Star Trek Next Generation, this became a thing, right? So somebody on the show knew enough about orbital mechanics to know that that was a thing. That was a real thing that you could do, and it wasn't bullshit. But of course, they fly so close to the sun. I mean, it's a little bit of bullshit.
It
Okay,
could
just put your
save your
bullshit.
life. Yeah.
They're going so close to the sun, though. The hull of the Enterprise is starting to
Oh,
get a
yeah.
little hot. The toilets are overflowing, and they're like, "Hang in there, we're doing the Picard maneuver, so it's all gonna work out." And they're all like, and then they succeed, and they're all like, "Picard, you're the man. You are the man. You know your orbital mechanics better than anybody." Sorry, that was too much, wasn't it? Take it down a
No.
notch.
No, it wasn't. This is the stuff we live and breathe. I mean, seriously, like the core nugget of knowledge and scientific fact, I mean, sure, we can make jokes about it too. You can drag it out and turn it into it. But the point is, could you use that to create drama and interest for the show? Maybe did it get tired when they kept doing it? Was it cheesy, campy, whatever? There's a lot of like there's a lot of knobs on it, but like
Yeah.
isn't that what we're doing when we're making games? I mean, I think like realism in games, we could have a whole talk about realism in games, and it's just like fighting realism in games is often, a fight that I find, maybe fight's the wrong word, but your energy is very infectious. And so I'm like, oh, I'm feeling fighty now. I'm like, no, games should not be realistic. I live with reality. There's parts of reality I like physics.
Mhm.
Physics are fun. Physics are tons of fun. Let's use them. But you know what? If the physics doesn't suit and it's not fun, we don't need it. But we have a conceit.
Yeah, we take from reality when it directly benefits the game experience and the fun, right? Like these asteroids have these precious metals basically on them, right? And I'm like, ooh, take over this asteroid, get all these precious metals. You need some other metal. It's over on that asteroid. So you've got to go and control by fighting and removing the others that are there.
Yes. Unrestrained capitalism. I love it.
We call that evicting. Evicting the current.
Well, you have the propaganda system implemented in your game too. That's really good.
Commander, we need you to evict the tenants on asteroid 3012. No problem.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I continually try to explain, to myself that like the game we're creating isn't just a like space colonialism reinforcement mechanism about how humans should go take over everything and the world isn't safe without us. So we better go tell all the other civilizations how to behave. I never have that thought ever.
Yeah. It's a little bit, we've all had this conversation, right? We're sitting around, there's some sort of show on, whatever movie where there's aliens and they're going to kill us all. And then you go in your 40s and you're 50, and then you realize, we're the aliens. We're actually the ones going to go to other planets and other systems and say, we really like what you've done with the place, but we'll take over now.
Yeah, there was an old, you probably heard that old Jack Handyism from Saturday Night Live.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, go tell me. Yeah, I
where,
remember.
where it goes something like, I can imagine a world at peace, a world without weapons, a world without war. We could kick that world's ass.
That is beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yeah.
The only thing stopping us at this point is the fact that we don't have the capability to do what you just described, which is go dominate all the other living life forms.
Yeah. It's true, though. It's true. You do kind of confront humanity when you design these games. You do have to ask yourself some hard questions. And when I designed the motivation behind one of the factions in Supreme Commander, which I don't talk about it very often. One of them was a group of pacifists. They didn't believe in war. They didn't believe in killing. So when they found out some other group was building war machines or going to do something, they attacked them and killed them all because they wanted to make sure they weren't going to cause any trouble. And of course, I borrowed that from real life, from a real life country and a real life civilization. You don't have to look very far to find it. I love the irony of that. We're protecting everyone from everything except, and those guys over there look like they're causing trouble. So we're going to go kick their ass. Just the irony of that is not lost on me. I'm sorry.
No.
Might be too much though to talk about out loud with the outside voice.
Well, but I mean, no jokes, well, and jokes, which is we are humans making games for now, at least humans playing games.
Yep.
Maybe in the future, other creatures will be playing our games. But how do we deal with difficult circumstances? Well, we make art around it. We tell stories about it. And crucially, we use humor. And things that are horrible can be couched with humor. And things that are funny can be couched with seriousness. And, if I were to sort of distill some of the Urquan Masters and some of those like very memorable things, and for like we reference Jack Vance all the time, but it's just like what makes Jack Vance work, and I blame Fred and Paul for turning me on to Jack Vance, and now I'm obsessed too, is, well, you took something that actually is kind of difficult and kind of serious, and you put it into these very relatable, very human terms, and now it has irony, now it has humor, now it has all these things, and you didn't get so caught up and like sit on the rock and think about it. You just kind of like, it's like a kid tapping you on the shoulder and saying, look behind you, and then they're gone. And you're like, wait, now I'm thinking about this thing, but you didn't give me everything, but my head's thinking about it and I have to relate about it. So the sort of, I think about, certainly for the game we're working on, but just in general, like our job isn't necessarily to fix the world, make deep commentary on things. There's a lot of interesting stuff. You can get sources of inspiration from everywhere, but how can you make it relatable so that someone will sit down and listen to you about it? It's probably not by beating it into their head and boring them to death. Why was the Daily Show in America anyway, like so effective? It's like, well, you have some humor, you have some wit, and you take something really serious, and then we can all get together and laugh about it a little,
Such an important word for game designers is relatable.
Relatable.
If you put something in front of someone that's arguably is not relatable, it doesn't penetrate. There's got to be a place for them to get inside the experience.
I like that. I don't think I've ever heard that. I'm gonna hold that because I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you said it, and it came up for the first time. So a gentleman that approached me on my site, he said to me, "Please come and look at what I've created, and give me your feedback on it." And I was brutally honest with him. I said, "Listen, I'm not going to do that thing where I just tell you that, hey, this is great, keep going. I said, I'm going to give you brutal feedback, but I don't want you to stop doing what you're doing. I want you to follow your vision all the way. But you asked me, you deserve an honest answer." And I said, the number one thing you got to work on here is the relatability of the experience, where I can plug in from something that I understand. And maybe you don't have to totally disrupt the gameplay or a lot of your vision to create relatable elements that can bring someone in who wouldn't otherwise, who would bounce off, who would just skip off the ionosphere. You know what I mean? And just keep on going. That was my advice. And so it came up when you said the word relatable, I totally picked up on it. And I thought, man, when I was doing game design talks back at GDC on stage, we did get me in there and I'd be talking. I never used the word relatable. We used a different phrase that I actually got early on in my career called high concept, but it wasn't as good. Relatable is better because your different audiences, different market segmentation, if you want to call it that, they all relate to something different. So it's not just about being a high concept, it's about being a concept that is relatable within that market segment. So just a little bit of a spoiler alert, I'm working on something that, not professionally, on my day job, because I have a day job, and I'm working on something for people my age that is interactive and fun. So the audience that I'm talking about here, and hopefully we've got some of those on the call so they're not like, oh, old people, but it's 45 to 65. And I'm 57, okay? So I'm at the upper end of the 45, 65 range here. Okay. So guess what? I'm creating an experience which is relatable by people in that age bracket, in that market segment, right? Huge, huge. But high concept was when we described games that were like racing games and space games and helicopter fly. You fly a helicopter, you fly a jet fighter. Remember all those games out of Microprose that were all just high concept? It was like Wild Bill. He just knew to create these big pillars, these big high concept games, and everyone could go into the software game store of choice and they could pick up the box and look at it and they go, I totally get it. I know what I'm going to be getting when I get home, right? I don't have to do any heavy thinking here. But it was really the relatability part of it. That was the word I wished I could articulate, 35 years ago or 30 years ago.
That's funny because when you mentioned Burt Reynolds earlier, I was gonna say that's probably not relatable to a lot of the people who are gonna be watching
Right.
this.
Right. They're like, I might as well have mentioned John Wayne. I asked guys on a call the other day because I have a team of folks working on a bunch of different things. I said, how many of you know who Elvis Presley is? And I expected everyone to just go take a hike. Everybody knows who Elvis Presley is. But a couple of them actually were scratching their chin for a second. And I was like, give Elvis another 20 years. And Elvis is going to really have left the building, I bet you all of them that did know that were in the younger generation, say under 30, they probably don't know what Graceland is, you know? They probably don't know any of the backstory. They probably don't know a lot of that. The movie might have helped that came out, but I mean, this is what we're dealing with today, right? It's a moving target of relatability in that audience. So, well, it is what it is, and I'm having fun with it. I'm actually getting a kick out of saying to myself, what changed between 20 and almost 60? What changed in my brain chemistry? Why did it change? Why am I enjoying playing word chums with my mom so much? I mean, mom is mom. And I'm like, I'm going to kick her ass. And I'm playing word chums. And I'm like, she's ahead of me on the scorecard. I'm like, I'm going to kick her ass. I'm enjoying that. I'm not playing, Descent. I'm not playing, Quake. I'm playing word chums and I'm enjoying myself. So that's how that really took a little bit of recalibrate what happens to the human mind, the male gaming mind or the gaming mind when they get old and interests change and you start relating to very, very different things. And you have a different sense of how should I spend my life? What's valuable to life? If you know what I'm saying by that. Like I've only, we don't have, it's not infinite. It ends. Might as well use it for all the right things that you can think of best you can. So wow, that got deep. Sorry about that.
And we got a shout out to moms too. That's
yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
crushing people in competitive games. A key component of Super Melee. No, well, I mean, like
Yeah.
I'm still catching up with you guys. But
Yeah.
I don't worry, everybody just called me a kid at Toys for Bob forever. And I still remember when I had a team of people and everybody who I was managing was older than me, and it still was very surreal. So I've walked a weird age line, and I would say like most of the games I worked on were targeted at kids. I mean, I can't remember ever being in a playtest session with someone like older than 12 or 14, honestly. I mean, I did a little bit of work on a more mature title, but I can't tell if that totally shaped my brain or I was pre-built that way, and even now I'm turning 40 this year, so I'm still fairly young, but I've had my own, I think everybody does, but not just the gaming ecosystem changes, but your life changes. And like I mean, I used to not be able to play a game with my friend unless I was sitting in front of the same monitor. I mean, it blows my mind. I mean, okay, I played Descent. Speaking of Descent, I played Descent tying up the dial-up line in my dad's house with my friend whose also name is Dan. And when I was, I don't know, 6 years old or something, but now it's like, well, like you said, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to spend my time on? What experiences do I enjoy? And, like for me, Skylanders was very formative because not just for me, it's also what I want to create for someone. Seeing like a kid, an older kid play with their younger kid, seeing a parent play a game with their child, like the whole idea of cooperative across generations. You want to talk about relatability? For me, the best part about Skylanders had nothing to do with like the toys and all of the success or whatever. It is like this game got a parent playing with their child, or this game got
And having
children,
fun. Yeah.
yeah, and having fun, and not like, and it was, and they would talk about it, and people, I would hear stories from both. I actually was pretty close with someone who had two younger kids, and she talked about how like her kids would play the game together with each other, and they wouldn't play anything together until Skylanders. And it was just like, wow, it's not just about get a good game, get a good review, make a ton of money. It's like, look at what we can do. We can actually create these experiences that people bond over. So just like you were talking about with your mom, it's like, I mean, I remember what I used to play with my dad. It was chess, you know, and I had like, I at a certain point, he had to stop playing with me. I mean, I'm not patting myself on the back. His exact words were, well, you've gotten too good for me. I can't keep up. But that idea that like, hey, I've gotten older. Do I really want to make a game where like that I would have played like Quake, you know, when I was a kid? I'm like, oh, I want to kill all my friends, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, I don't want to play that game anymore. And I also don't want to make it because I've seen the other version of it. And that's so much more attractive. And the idea of creating relatability and it not being on me, but it being on people. Like the joy of like, I grew up on MUDs and stuff, but the joy of MUDs and MMOs and any like, especially cooperative game, but even multiplayer Quake, I did LAN parties and things, is like, it's up to the people playing the game. They form relationships while they play it, and they, you know, they get competitive, they get cooperative, whatever they're doing. The idea that like we can bring people together who normally wouldn't even be together, you know, is kind of cool. I mean, that's what the whole internet, I guess, is about. And maybe you could argue what the disaster of the internet is like, oh no, now I'm exposed to all this stuff I don't want to be exposed to. But you know, at least as far as a game, you know, putting my blinders back on, I go, well, you know, this all sounds so highfalutin, but it's true. Like, hey, we can make it relatable for multiple people if they can share the experience. And that's really neat.
Yeah. And then they connect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Connecting parents with their kids. That has got to be one of the best things, the best emails that I read. I get emails on TA even today, and they say, this was a game my dad played with me, and we had this experience together. I should print those out and frame them. Fred, I have to ask you, because we're sucking all the oxygen out, the two of us. Do you get emails? Do you have an email address that people know about where they can send you like fans or players enjoys? Do they have a way of reaching you that they can tell you what all the great times they had were?
Yeah, I mean, I don't I'm an introvert by nature. I don't broadcast my information, but I don't particularly try to hide it. So anybody who has just a teeny bit of motivation can reach me.
Fair?
But yeah, and
Yeah.
we have a Discord right now for our
Oh, cool.
for Children of Infinity, which is the name of the sequel to
Nice.
Well, there's a
Urquell
lot of
Masters.
Urquell Masters
Yeah.
fans in there. And I mean, like, I mean, Fred, you've gotten lots of fan letters over the
Oh yeah.
years too. Yeah. I mean, we used to hang them all up at Toys for Bob too. Speaking of printing them out, you know?
I got somebody who actually just this year, or I was late last year, sent me a letter.
What?
I mean,
Wow.
he emailed me and said, "Can I send you a physical letter?" And I said, "Sure." So I gave him my address, and I won't read you the letter. Oh, and he was in Israel. He gave me, I don't know what this is worth, if anything, but just to, I think, buy us a pizza or a beer if we ever come over. But yeah, anyway.
We get a lot of sorry I pirated your game when I was younger messages. That's one of my current personal favorites on a slightly lighter note. But to your point too about like, well, I don't know, Fred, you can we always love hearing you talk, but we respect your introversion. And you know, I am a person of many words and few insights, and Fred's kind of the opposite. So it's good to have us suck up some air.
I'm looking for my hat that was sent to me by the guys who created Beyond All Reason, the Total Annihilation. If they're watching this, they're going to be really upset that I didn't pimp the hat. So let me find it.
I have a I know you mentioned your own fanboying, and I usually try to reserve this. There's only so many people I get to do this with, just period, just because I've worked in the industry so long. But I do have, I'm going to warn you, I do have a little bit of fanboying for some of your work that I have to get to at some point. No rush, no rush.
Can't find it.
Look, it's on top of your head. No,
I have so much stuff. I have so much stuff, and I don't get rid of anything. I am this close. Here's a pro tip. If you're a hoarder, I mean, if you're someone who likes to collect stuff, get a bigger house. If you distribute the same amount of shit in a larger surface area, you no longer are a hoarder. You're just a guy with a lot of stuff. But if it piles up again, you really have to. You don't need a house. You can just get an old container, and put it on wood blocks in your yard. No one will mind, I'm sure, and load that up with stuff. Okay, so you can keep your stuff.
This is the real takeaway. We're going to make the highlight reel, and this is going to be the clip. Chris Taylor's advice for all aspiring game developers: get a container and put it in front of your house.
I used to be a hoarder, but then I got a bigger house.
Yeah.
I'll soon be a hoarder again, but then I'll get a bigger house.
Oh, I found it.
Hats off to you. Oh, he'll be back.
Oh no. Oh no. No.
Buried in an avalanche of material.
Don't worry, it's in your other house. You didn't talk about the second house yet.
I'm gonna have to just go with the cave dog hat, which is almost is kind of cool. The old cave dog. I don't know. I think the design of hats have changed where the hats now are steeper. So this looks kind of a little bit, and plus my head is huge. Is head size a thing? No one ever talks about it. Like, hey, I met this girl. She's amazing. She's got a giant head. No one ever says that. So I don't think having a big head is something we talk about. Anyway,
no, it is because calling yourself, I've said it earlier, I think big-headed is sort of denigrating. It's sort of like you're full of yourself, right? And actually, that might not be American English. I may have picked that up from my ex-girlfriend who is Irish, and so I've picked up a lot of international isms, and she said that all the time, like oh, not to get a big head about this, and I'm just like, okay, sorry, I don't want to come across too big-headed. I'm like, all right. But so I think I just picked up on all of it. And so I think that lives in my head for her. But I will say I also have a big head, but in the literal sense. And you have to find people who, what's a hatter called? They're not called hatter. There's another name for them. Anyway.
Haberdasher?
Haberdasher, yeah. Haberdasher, yes. If you go to haberdashery, you will find all kinds of things out about your head size. Just, if you're learning how to hoard things, now you can hoard hats of different sizes or whatever.
Here's how you know you have a big head. You get a Oculus headset and you take it off your head and you put it on someone's head and you go crank, 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 crank.
Or it falls down to their neck.
It's still a little sloppy. Crank, 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 crank. And you're like, how's that? Oh, that's good. That's good. And you're like, at least I can remember orbital mechanics. That's all I want.
Isn't like Orbis, isn't that the name of like the bones here? There's something about that.
The orbital bones, yeah.
Orbital bones, yeah. Here we go. It's all coming together. This has all been orchestrated, right?
Oh,
so that's why you're so interested in you can use that. It's free. Okay, well, so speaking of giving you a big head, I do want to, like, we've been talking for a while, and I just want to make sure I have a little bit of time for this. This is just maybe entirely self-serving for me, but I get to do it, and hopefully it'll be fun for you, which is I played so much Dungeon Siege.
Oh, wow.
That I actually, I had a group of friends that I met in high school, and like they were big on Total Annihilation. I was the worst RTS player of our friend group. So when we would do LAN parties, like I would lose unless I found the cheese strategy. I was pretty good at finding the cheese strategy, but TA, I could never do the cheese strategy. So I never figured it out. But we play, I told my friend I'd say this. So he will, I don't know if he will mind, but my memories of Dungeon Siege are mostly sitting in his room, because I didn't have a PC at the time, and I would sit in his room and we would play forever and make characters forever. And that was a game where I feel like my memories, we want to talk about forgetting things. Most of my memories are about, I know exactly what his room was like. I remember us sitting there and staring at this thing go, and it felt like the Incredible Machine or something, where it was just like it could go forever and ever and ever. And we would stare, and he was usually driving, and I would sit there and just be like watching, and or we'd play co-op or whatever. And there was I'm just kind of, because I've never heard it. I want to know a little bit about like what your experience developing that was like, if you want to talk about it. But I also just want to say, like, I was a huge fan, he was a huge fan, and also give my own formal apology, which is I'm pretty sure I pirated that game. I'm so sorry. I owe you $50.
I'm coming to wherever you live right now to get my $50, but I have to split the money up over the giant team of incredible people and all the hard work that labored on that thing for over 4 years.
It's
to
just
build
like
that.
bringing the gold asteroid back.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
You have to rip up the
Here-
money. No, seriously, I
here's your
never
9
played
cents.
anything quite
Yeah,
like it.
exactly.
The flight down cost me $1,200, but here's your 9 cents. You're welcome. Well, my favorite thing about Dungeon Siege multiplayer world, the team built this area called the Pit of Despair. And it's a spiraling thing that goes down and down and down. And then there's a maze. And it's meant to confuse, so you can't really map it very well because it has some illogical, like non-physical reality corners in it, just because we could do it with the node system. And I remember somebody coming up to me and saying, I just can't tell you enough how frustrated I am, and I'm just annoyed and pissed off. I mean, the pit of despair. I mean, I've just found that to be madness. And I'm like, oh, it worked.
Was that the same guy who sent you the other email?
No,
Yeah.
this is years ago. I mean, that
Okay.
came out in 2002, so that's already 22 years old, right? So that was probably like 7 or 8 years later. I got a complaint about the pit of despair causing
Wow.
actual despair. And I was happy about it. I was like, oh, that's one of the few cases where shit went right.
We succeeded in making you miserable. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
Well, I did just want to say, like, seriously, like, I don't remember how many untold hours. Of course, I was a high schooler and I had untold hours
That's
and very
great.
few responsibilities, but I spent untold hours on that. And my, maybe it is the curse of sort of being a kid or whatever, but like, I run into so many people and I talk about Dungeon Siege and they say, "What's Dungeon Siege?" And I go, "What? You never experienced this?" And like, I think I have another friend, and the other game that reminds me of Dungeon Siege, where we also feel like we have a similar experience, is Dragon's Dogma. And it's like there's this cult classic, and I actually want to ask you what you think of the phrase cult classic. But there's this idea, because people use it for their Quan Masters too, and there's this idea that like, wait, you haven't heard of this? Oh my gosh. But when I play Dragon's Dogma, I'm like, these people were playing Dungeon Siege, weren't they? I mean, I don't know if they were, or if it's just convergent evolution or whatever, but it's so interesting when I think about like, wow, I played this for hours. It meant so much to me. And I see the echoes in other games because it was like, one of those formative games. And so like, what is it like? Has anybody described it as a cult classic? What does that mean to you? What does it feel like to say like, oh, what's a cult classic? What's your relationship with the phrase?
Well, first of all, it's really nice. There's nothing quite like it to create something that people have locked away, in their hearts from their childhood. There's just no. So I will say that that's a really special thing. The fact that they use the word cult classic, I think of that always in the positive. I don't think of cult as Jimmy Jones down in Guyana. You know what I mean? I don't ever think of cult. It's just short form of culture, which is obviously not always. It's not a negative thing. Um, and honestly, I love the fact that it would be referred to by those folks as a cult classic. And I love the fact that other people have stolen or borrowed or liberated, ideas. I was having the time of my life when I wrote the initial design document, and I had the gigantic inventories and the pack mule. And the name of the design document, by the way, was RTS FRPG. Real-time strategy fantasy role-playing game. It was merging all the things that I liked about RTS with fantasy role-playing. And I played Diablo. You didn't ask this question. I'm just foisting this upon you, but I couldn't stand the loading screens in Diablo. They took forever. So I wanted to eliminate loading screens. Well, that one decision probably added 2 years to the project. Okay. Like that was killer. Having a dynamic node system that would dynamically load stuff and unload stuff. Remember, it's not just about loading. You only have a certain amount of memory. You got to decide what to throw away. So it's really super technical and complicated. And we demoed it to Bill Gates. I'll tell you what, I shook Bill Gates' hand. And it's one thing to be confident and you're like running your company and you're like, every day you're just kind of going off. And then you meet Bill Gates and you're like, hi, Bill. And then you got to say something meaningful and you go blah, 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 like this, and you're like, you leave and you're driving away in your car and you're like, what happened? And you're like, I'll tell you what happened, Chris Taylor. You met the richest man in the world, okay? And he shook your hand, he touched you, and you turned into a jabbering fool. That's what happened.
That's
now,
because he implanted a chip in your hand.
He did, and ever since then, I've been under the control of Bill Gates. I send 40% of my paycheck to this address. I don't know why I do it, but I had to include that because that was part of that Dungeon Siege thing, and we were giving a demo to him, and we were just all like, "Gotta like get this game built." And we took the steepest section up the cliff. Like there's stairs over there, there's an elevator over there, and we said, "Let's just climb without a safety rope up the steepest section of cliff." That's what we did when we built Dungeon Siege. The team, I don't think you can duplicate that in today's world. If you say work-life balance, you're done. There was no work-life balance. I was a man, and he knows, if he ever was watching this, he'd know who he is. 3 beautiful children, 3 boys. He was a good dad. He took the job and he said, I don't mind working late. I don't mind working, a lot. And after about 6 months of us just going, where are you? Like after a normal work day, he's like, well, I want to spend time with my boys and I want to spend time with my family. And we're like, no, that doesn't play. Sorry. No, I can't remember whether he voluntarily quit or we asked him to leave, but we were like, no, we're working 7 days a week. We're working like 10, 12. The last 6 months of Dungeon Siege was 7 days a week. And I'm not exaggerating, 14 hours a day. 14 hours a day for 6 months at the end. People call it the death march. But we didn't really feel like we were in a death march. We felt like we were doing our passion. We were doing what we loved. So if you didn't love it, then it was a death march, which means we didn't want you in the march. We didn't want, there's the big world out there. We would tell people, don't come to be on a death march with us when there's the whole world out there. You're talented. You can get a job elsewhere. Don't make me feel guilty running gas-powered games that I'm the only place that will employ you in the state of Washington. You know what I mean? There's other places you can go to work, but if you're going to be here with us, we are working on this thing like crazy people to get it done, and because that's what we do. And that doesn't just, you go to websites today for startups where they got money from VC and they're like, we have great benefits and work-life balance. And I'm like, yeah, you're never going to ship anything. I'm sorry, you're not going to ship anything. Not as a startup, right? You can't have that soft attitude unless you're veterans and you know exactly what you're doing and you've got resources that you can tap. There's cheats that you can do to close that gap. But if you're starting from scratch and you're building your own experience up from the ground up and you've got a finite amount of money that you've raised and you've got to deliver something, it's a great way to run out of cash in a startup is to say, we don't have to work 7 days a week. We don't have to work, 14 hours a day. Sorry, that's brutal, but I think it's more true than not. It may be a little bit of hyperbole, but it's more true than not.
The game industry is a harsh mistress.
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah. And if you don't love it, you can't do it because you just want to make money. You can't do it because you just want to be famous and make something that's a hit on Steam. You have to do it for the absolute love of the art. Love the art. I give a talk at a DICE or a GDC called Love the Art. And it was all about loving the art. of making games. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. We could talk. The three of us could sit here and talk for 9 hours. I mean, or yeah, arbitrary like the time, right?
Yeah, 9 really only?
We could talk for 9 hours and 14 minutes.
All right. Well, you said 14-hour days. I'm holding you to it. We're trapped in here until like midnight our time. You too, Fred.
I wonder how many would stick with us to the end before they tap out. They're like, okay, I can't take this shit. I'm out.
I was about to say something, but I realized it's a little too spoiler by the time people see this, so I won't say it. But you'll know what I'm referring to when some more information is out, and I'll message you.
Okay,
I'll
I
message
like
you
it.
privately, Chris, because there's something that popped into my head, and one of the things, like, full disclosure, I stopped working in games because it burned me out, and I had literal medical problems
Oh man.
because
Oh
of
man.
a project. Like, yeah, this is the the brutal truth is, yeah, look, I loved working on Skylanders, but not at the end. And, finishing Trap Team literally caused me physical disability. And, like, it actually injured me. And, especially when I bring in new people, and like, I love that enthusiasm. And even look, yeah, I worked the crazy times too, and I did that too. And when I have a passion project, especially when I'm not getting paid for it and I'm doing it just because I love it, then I really can channel a lot of, I'll just call it insanity. And I carry that around with me too. My days, I think many people know this, but like, I get up at 8. I start work almost every weekday. This is what my weekday is. I start, I work. I usually have like a 15-minute lunch break. And I'm in Silicon Valley, so I'm not trying to do a humble brag. This is just true. It's like I work, but I also know I need to stop. And I need to stop at 5:30, and I'm pretty strict about that. Then I go dance for 2.5 hours. I come home, I eat dinner at 10 p.m. Those are my usual weeknights. On the weekends, I do something a little different. Back in the day, I would have not gone dancing. I would have just kept working, because I don't know if it's a personality thing, but like, it's part of why I like games. I like something engaging. I need to do stuff. Reading is fun too, because I can use a lot of like creativity, but like music as well. Movies and TV, I don't want to say patience, but I can't just sit there. In any case, but like, working on Skylanders and Trap Team in particular caused actual physical disabilities to me. And I had to like work from home to finish the project because like I was ill and I couldn't come to the office. So I finished the project as one of the few remote employees on that. And so I left games because I said, you know what? That was kind of a wake-up call for me, which is I can put a lot of love into something, but if the love actually like causes me to not want to be in my body, and I don't really have another one lying around, it's like, hey, time for a break.
Yeah.
So
From my perspective, though, I would say some of that, I don't know how much of a percentage was just a toxic people environment too.
oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, so not
it's
just working on the
totally
game, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not. I'm not gonna. It would be weird to pin it on a singular aspect,
Right.
but there were aspects of it, and certainly the crunch and timelines around it were part of it too. And there's another. If anyone ever wants that full story, I'll write the nice sanitized version of it or something. But for the purposes of the conversation, I guess the point is, for me, I had a wake up call of like, oh, hang on, there's something I need to be paying attention to right now. And I said, I need a break from this. I actually thought like I'm going to be not making games anymore. And I remember someone who was close to me at the time, I became project manager, working in sort of a startup that got purchased by Disney, and working with like teams of engineers. And so I really liked it because I liked getting to be around all the people that I was used to working with, creative people, but I wasn't on the hook for like actually delivering things. And it was a much more, I don't want to say casual. There was still a lot of interesting stuff to do. And, we shipped Disney Plus was the thing that we launched, and that was cool. But there were other projects that they worked on too. And I just liked being in that environment without having all the stress. The siren song came back to me long before I was even talking with like Fred and Paul, and they came to me and said like, hey, would you be interested in like working together again? And it was a very fast turnaround to go, well, yeah, I would. But even before that happened, yeah, I think my girlfriend at the time would tell me, you talk about games a lot and like the sort of stuff you wish you were doing and you would want to do. And then, coming back into it was almost just a matter of like sliding back down the ramp. I don't know. It's not that I have no self-control, but it's like games are so interesting. I mean, we've talked about it we've talked a long time here, but we've talked about like, well, why is it that we want to work so hard on this? Well, the outcomes are so interesting, connecting children and parents, being able to make these experiences for people. Like, obviously, we have I don't know, a quirk in the brain, something like that, that says, I want to make something that someone else can enjoy. And that's important to me. Like, would I be happy working in a bank, working on some back-end
No,
software?
terrible,
Probably not. Yeah.
terrible.
Unless and that's why project management was kind of fun, because I get to make my colleagues happy and make them feel successful. And that's sort of how I got that. But the idea of like, if I'm not bringing joy to some other person, I'm really miserable, is sort of, you want to talk about things you learned when you get older or whatever. Like, I learned that about myself. I didn't know it when I was younger. And so the magnetic pull of like games and that the sort of passion, I mean, I could talk about what we're doing here on this team. And yes, I do find myself working, I talk about, oh yes, the 4-day work week. I can't wait to be there. And it's like, well, we're not going to be there for a little while. And I find myself pulling a lot of weight, on more time that I would want to spend. And I have to find the right balance. For me, it's important to keep going, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but the magnetic pull of, but this is going to make someone really happy. That's my personal version of it. And that really motivates me. And it's not so much like perfectionism, like, oh, I can make this better. That was me when I was younger. Like, yeah, I'd pull all-nighters because I'm like, I got to implement this multiplayer mode. It came to me in my dreams and it's like, it's amazing and whatever. And it was super creative. It's more like, no, if I see this through enough, some other people are going to be really happy or could be. I don't know.
You just made me wonder something I didn't ask, because we just met for the first time on this call. And that is what you guys your roles are and what the other members of the team are. Can you guys share that information? I'd love to know, Dan, what you're doing. Fred, are you coding? Are you designing? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, well, so I was the chief architect of Toys for Bob's tool suite for decades. Um,
Oh,
and
decades of that?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And it got to a point where uh it was a big boat that was hard to steer.
Mm.
Um, and then for whatever reasons, when we were doing Skylanders, uh, it was it became split between two studios so that they could give each studio a two-year uh, runway, but stagger them by a year. So a Skylanders game would come out every year, and that added so much inefficiency because uh, neither team really wanted to use the other team's technology. And so by that point, I, well, not just me, but we made the decision to use the other studio's technology. Um, and I kind of faded into the background as no longer the chief technologist at Toys for Bob, but more into my studio head role. Paul and I were co-studio heads. And so for 5 or 6 years, that was the role I had at Activision until we left. And leaving gave me the opportunity. So over all those years of making the tool that we used to make games, I had better ideas, or at least I thought I had better ideas for the next generation and of what I wanted to do. And um, so I had been thinking about that for at least those 5 or 6 years while I was just being the studio head. And so when we left, I had to get it out of my head. And so I built, it's not really a game engine, although in some ways it is. It's what I call a simulation, a multiplayer, an out-of-the-box multiplayer simulation engine, serverless simulation engine, um, that is sort of a lower level than what you might think of as like Unity scripting, C# scripting. It's 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 meant to control the gameplay and and it really has no viewing component to it. So it's just simulations running kind of with input. And there's a default viewer that comes with the IDE that you use to make your gameplay. But then on top of it, so you would then slot this into something like Unity or Unreal, or choose your own graphics, sound effects, whatever engine. And you would use C# scripting on top of that. But the simulation engine core is platform agnostic. So anybody on any platform can be playing the same game, provided that a viewer has been built
Right.
on that platform. And it's the simulation engine is built for designers. It's built to empower designers to make gameplay. And Dan's the chief designer who uses it, and he could probably add more color. But that's what I had to get out of my head.
Nice. So
Yeah, so
you've almost got a client server architecture in a way. If you wanted to put the sim engine into the cloud and the
It's
client
serverless. It's peer-to-peer predict rollback.
oh wow. Oh,
So it's multiplayer out of the box. Anybody can pick it up, can make stuff, and it'll be multiplayer.
wow. Oh, that sounds great.
yeah, you
Yeah.
just need a way to connect the peers. So we have a simple like 100 line of code thing. I think that's based off of
Yeah,
Valve's work.
it basically just introduces the peers to each
Yeah.
other to abstract the IP address shenanigans. But
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So
So
Fred, go
yeah.
ahead. No, go ahead.
No. I mean, I'm getting into this. I'm okay. If you want to cut some of this stuff out because we might lose some folks on technical implementation. But I love this stuff because, of course, a lot of what I'm doing is all about multiplayer. Everything is multiplayer. Everything is persistent world. Everything connects to everything, every device. So love this and how you solve for this by getting people to exchange, because some people have complex routers and things like that in their house, which means you can't get packets in, but they can call out, obviously. So a mirror or something that sits in the cloud that bounces packets, if they can't see each other, is the only other thing that I've understood is possible with
yeah,
a
we
peer-to-peer engine.
yeah, you do need I guess those are called turn servers or turn yeah. You do need that in those cases, but I haven't been solving that part yet, but
Yeah,
I'm aware of that part.
yeah. We ran into that 25 years ago on Total Annihilation. Believe it or not, we were solving that exact problem. People couldn't see each other over the internet. That's a way to couch it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan, I cut you off.
Oh no, that's okay.
No.
So that's the technical part, but it was written for people like Dan, who was familiar with our old tool suite, and so he can take it from here, I guess.
Yeah, I'll at least back up into some of my lineage because I think it's important. Everybody says their tools are the best. I think it's unless or depend or they're the worst and they hate them. I've never met anybody in the middle. There's nobody says it's okay. It's like either the studio loves their tools or they're like, oh, we're using this thing. It sucks. But we have to use it. Whatever. So jokes aside, a uniform experience at Toys for Bob, which I observed, and I'm very biased on this, is we had tools that designers loved. We had tools that programmers didn't like. We had tools that maybe animators and artists didn't like as much. And I'm not, Fred worked on this, so you're hearing all this stuff, but it's like, I don't know, Fred, if you would disagree with any of that, but really,
I'd say when he says like engineers didn't like it, it's really because designers had all of the power.
and it was made for them.
It was made for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is, like my lineage was at Toys for Bob. I started as actually animation and art kind of intern, and then I became a game designer, and I've become more like technical, whatever. I've gone all over the place. But that tool set was such an empowering piece of technology for everybody who worked at Toys for Bob. So it's exactly what Fred said, where it really lets the designer do whatever they want. And this kind of newest, it's not an iteration, it's an evolution and also a branch, because the old tool did a lot more stuff. This does less stuff, but not categorically less. It's just trying to solve fewer problems, and it's solving new problems too. So one of the big like hindrances of the old tool is there was no way we could ever do multiplayer. And so other than like couch co-op, there's a reason why a lot of like Toys for Bob games built that tool. I think none were built with online multiplayer as like a core component. Like, yes, you can definitely play live. This is a 1v1 fighting game or whatever. You know, it was not something we could do. So this newest kind of creation that's been living in Fred's head is really a way for designers to learn and have a way to program without thinking about how hard programming is. And it's not, it's visual scripting, but it's more like mouse driven programming and less like node spaghetti. You know, you're not making graphs and wires and things like that. You still wind up with legible text. It has a flow, it follows some rules, but the rules are so simple, and I don't want to overstate it too much, but like there are very few commands you can use, but the commands that you have are very rich. And the thing, you know, like when we talk about what it does out of the box, um, one of the interesting things and one of the challenges of the new tool is it does so little because it's up to the designer to put it together. So the metaphor, like Fred and I have different metaphors. So the idea is like, you can use this tool to assemble a person, but the tool doesn't give you arms and legs and eyeballs. It gives you molecules. You have to decide how the person is going to be put together, and it's up to you to make your arm. And one of the things I like about working this way and having like onboarded other designers with stuff like this is when designers are invested in learning how to solve problems and given agency to solve problems, yes, they will create problems. But just like we were talking about earlier, the sort of passion of like, I love what I'm doing. When designers can make their own problems, they are so much more motivated to solve their own problems. And then designers programming the game means, yes, we can joke engineers go off at the end and they're just, you know, sipping martinis at the bar or whatever, where all the designers are working really hard. But the idea is the investment on what you're making not only is better just on an emotional level and a personal level for designers, because no engineer is saying, well, our engine doesn't support this, you can't do that. It's up to them to decide what they want to do. But also the games we're making are not locked in. You know, I worked very briefly on like a Call of Duty project just at the very end of my like tenure with Activision. And it was so fascinating having worked with this tool and different tools like, you know, Unreal, Unity, all those things that are just very wide open on what they want to do. And going back to the Call of Duty engine, which is it's made from Quake. It has its lineage back to Quake. This thing is supposed to be a first-person shooter. You have to work really hard to not make it a first-person shooter. Whereas like our tools and what we're trying to do, yeah, we're making, you know, Aircon Masters 2 or Pre-Stars, Children of Infinity, whatever the code name persists, you know, we're working on this, but the tool has its own life and it's up to the creator to do whatever they want with it. And one of the cool things we've done that if I could talk it up just a little, is we've released the tools publicly. People have already made stuff with it. People have made pinball. They've made an Arkanoid clone. We have someone making a joust kind of joust alike, you know, and I don't want to talk up too much of their work because they're doing all the work, but being able, like, I want to talk about one of the cool things about being independent and also working with Fred, because it's Fred, it's all his work, you know, hey, we can release our tools, you know, we can let other people use this. We can decide we want people to do this. And it's been really fun. And I used to do, I'm going to be doing again, development streams on Twitch. People would just watch me twice a week. I don't know why, working in this tool. And it's effectively just sitting there programming and designing and stuff like that. But being able to share this kind of stuff with everyone is really neat. And like, you know, I think it speaks to me on a personal level too, because I know we haven't really answered your question. What are we even doing on on this game? But, you know, maybe some of it's obvious, at least what Fred's doing. But one of the cool things, like, I don't know about you, but, you know, you shared your experience of like, hey, I had this computer, you saw it and you knew you want to be a game developer, that sort of thing. For me, like my entree into games was, I mean, yeah, my aunt, well, I played chess on an IBM XT computer when I barely even knew what chess was, you know, and that's just like, ooh, blinking light, touch button, cool. But, you know, my entree was modding and like, oh, I got this game and now I can make it do something else. Cool. So a lot of what this tool is and what sharing is so fun is, or what makes sharing so fun is, hey, I know how I got into this stuff. It's when I saw it wasn't a sealed box. I saw that the box had open ends, but there was enough, a little bit of a box to work in. And that's why modding and modders are so interesting, not interested and interesting, both true, is like, you've given me something to work with. I can sink my teeth into it. And now I can find ways to like move it around, even if I don't know what I'm doing. And so the tool we're working on, being able to share with everyone, just thinking like, you know, maybe I'm full, I'm too high-minded about it, but wow, maybe I will inspire some other kid to want to make games and then they can follow this torturous career path too. That'll be great. But the idea that like, hey, we can share it with people and share our development with people, and that'll maybe interest someone in getting involved is really cool. And the tools really do support that. They can do, I don't know if they can do anything, but Fred talked about some of the technical components, and they can do a lot of what a designer might want to try. So to actually answer your question and to stop talking, what I'm doing on the project is I guess I'm our executive producer and lead designer. I don't know. Could give me a lot of names, but that I'm the person with the tool most of the time. You know, we have a few other people who are getting their hands a little dirty in it, which is really cool.
Well, as he
But
mentioned, we're just out of pre-production and starting production, so we're probably going to add more people who are in the tool too.
yeah,
So
Yeah, I
that's
had
the
no
hope.
idea that you were doing it with that layout, that abstraction, if you want to call it that, right? So that people could um do it at a higher level of abstraction and control it without writing actual like C# code, which is what I hear you're saying. They don't
but
actually
the language itself has 6 opcodes. One of them is just a block command that lets you
right.
organize your things. So 5 opcodes, and one of them we hope you don't have to use very much. So really only 4 opcodes. And the richness comes through the properties and how you define the properties, uh, which causes different things to happen when you use the opcodes with those properties, kind of. And so the surface area of the language is very simple, but it's the interaction of that surface area with the things that you create that creates the complexity. So it's fairly easy for a person to keep the whole language in their head and then be able to experiment with the richness of parameterization and property markup.
So it sounds more atomic than molecular, because obviously at a molecular level, there's bajillions of things, but at an atomic level, there's a very small number of things, which makes the possibilities, the trade-off is, right, you have to work a little harder, but you can do almost anything that you want at the atomic
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah.
If we use that language, then the code itself is like subatomics, and area where people, you know, designers can't follow along. So just for fun, I will plug the fact that with Kanugi, what I'm doing is, where you've abstracted away C#, I'm abstracting away cloud, so that people don't have to know what a load balancer is, or what a virtual private cloud is, or security groups, or any of that. Do SSO, or single sign-on, or auth, or any of that, like, and taking money, collecting money, and finding a place to, and all of that, so that they can just create and have it run on any device. And it's easy to say, but it's a damn heavy lift. It sounds like you're way, you've done it and you've released the tools. That sounds like in a beta. Is that what I'm? Yeah. And I should
Alpha,
download it.
beta.
I gotta go to your site now and download.
Yeah, they're pretty old, and we have an even more featureful version. We've, you know, Fred was talking about different viewers. We're working in Godot now, so we've hooked it up the Godot as our viewer, and we have even better tools. We just haven't done a release in a while.
But
But
I
yeah,
have been giving I have been giving them to some select people.
Oh, okay. So I can't just go download the tools. I have to know somebody. Do you know, can you introduce me to somebody there at Pistol
Yeah,
Shred?
I could
Uh,
I could give them to you.
But it's hard to contact Fred. You have to send
That's
them
right.
a physical letter, and there better be 20 whatever currency of a certain country in there. Canadian
I'll,
dollars. We
yeah,
expect it.
I know I'm putting you on the spot, right? Because you're like, no, Chris, you're not the type that we want to have access to this. My problem, of course, is what so many of us older guys suffer from, which is time management. We go after things that are shiny. We go into them. Like, here's an example, right? Here's a Raspberry Pi. I'm just giving you one example. I've got like 10 of them around me. This is a Raspberry Pi Pico W, which means it's got wireless capability, which is 802.11x
Mhm.
with Bluetooth, and it's so damn cool. You just plug in your USB, and you can program it, right? I've got a whole pack of them. I've got a whole
Yeah,
pack of them. When am I going to program this Raspberry
yeah.
Pi Pico, right? Like, am I gonna like say, Kanugi, I'm not gonna work on you today. I mean, that's just honestly, if I was a billionaire, I would just turn into a gelatinous blob of I don't know what I'm going to do, and I would vibrate in every direction at once and accomplish nothing, right? Because every door would be open, and I'd try to go through every door, and it's like, honestly, less is more, for a life choice. So if you give me access, I will spend an evening and take a look, but I probably would then have to like pull myself back out again, because that's the world I live in right now, a world where you cannot get too distracted for too long from your own
Yeah.
mission that you're on, right? You get it, right? You guys get it. It's a real thing. This is real life.
Well, I mean, like seriously, I'll follow up after we talk, but like you're welcome to like
You
play
have
with
my
it.
email already anyway.
Yeah, you have our
Yeah,
emails, and
true.
also
It's
like
true.
if you want something to just play with that's very low investment, like there's a Super Melee prototype that is also publicly released. Like you can just go play Super Melee with our tools. It has no graphics, it has no sound, whatever, but that's because the tool doesn't do graphics and sound.
That's
So,
cool.
you can at least dip your
Cool.
toes in it and see some of
When he
the things
when
we
he
can do.
says no graphics,
Oh, sorry.
the default viewer just shows you collision volumes.
Yeah, it's
So
not that you
Oh.
get no display. That would be
yeah.
really hard to play. You're
Yeah,
playing
I
I
Super
win. I win
Melee. Yeah.
again.
I
Yeah,
thought he
I'm
was
so
talking about a
good.
command line, which do you ever do this? And I know I don't know if you're going to edit this down and including these words, but we're getting probably to the end here, but I got to
We should
ask you
try.
guys, do you ever just have moments? This is a nostalgic question, this is a romantic question, where you just go, oh, the first time I played Zork. Oh, that was so much fun, just going northeast, south, and west. And you think no one else would give a shit on this earth except for the old gang guys who got that on their first computer, their first home computer. And I kind of feel like we left some really cool things behind. That one of the things I'd like to do on Kanugi is I would like to have some of those old experiences there where people don't have to root around for them on the internet. They can go to the site and they can go to the nostalgia tab, and they can go play Zork if they want to, and just figure out how to get all some of the
Mhm.
get some of the legalities straightened out, or at least if someone's built it, maybe link to it. So it's a one-stop shop. But I just feel this weird thing, and I know I'm being an old nostalgic dude. But like, oh my God, there were so many cool games, and Wizardry. Remember Wizardry? Oh, that was so cool. It was so simple. It was so essential. I don't know. Archon. What a great so talking about your love for chess, right? Like what a bunch of great classics that I don't know. It just seems like they got lost to history somehow. So I don't know. You guys feel that way?
Yeah,
You
well,
think
I
you might?
definitely feel that games can be way more complicated these days than they need to be just because they can be. Whereas
Mhm.
back then they couldn't be because you didn't have the horsepower or the resources or whatever.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
it was just make what you could. But now that you can do almost anything, people do almost anything, and the simplicity has kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
I I
Yeah.
think like I
Yeah.
mean I'm younger, so I maybe have a different relationship, and I'll ask me again in 20 years. But I think well, it's a complicated one, and I have a few answers, which is one, uh, over the weekend I played one of my childhood memory games again, Gertrude's Secrets. An old Apple IIe game by the Learning Company. You can probably, as an
Mhm.
adult, sit there and play it and finish the game in maybe 10 minutes and you're done.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
but I think about that game and I think about why I liked it. And then I go play it again and try to remember, well, did I like this because I was a kid or whatever? But one, first of all, it's there on archive.org. I mean, I realize not the rights to everything. It's not that cut and dry. Is it even allowed to be on archive.org? I'm not the arbiter of that. All I know is I could find an old Apple IIe game on an emulator and go play it. And that was cool. That's the part, the sort of archival thing that distresses me out or distresses me a little, which is what are we going to do? You know, I mean, I get why companies want to protect their rights, but like, what are we going to do when there's no hardware to run this stuff anymore? That's really complicated. It's like film, right? It's like, well, if there's no projectors anymore, how are you going to watch film? Well, it's okay. We're archiving it. We're taking care of it. We're putting it in a place. So like, that's like really my only concern is that all these things are just and the internet's really good at solving this problem, right? Which is, well, it's hard to lose anything now. There might be legal gray areas and all kinds of stuff, but it's just nothing's going to get lost. So I'm not that worried about that. And I think digitization is cool for that. More to the point of like what Fred was talking about, and you're saying like, oh, we left something good behind. I have like complicated relationships with that. I just played a point and click adventure game over the past few weeks. I don't have too much gaming time, but I make some time. And it's just a classic point and click adventure. You have an inventory, you can click things in the world, you can apply objects from your inventory to things in the world, and you have to see what happens. That's not a new idea. In fact, it's a really, really, really old idea, and not a lot of people doing it anymore. But you know what? So like Fred's point, what I found so compelling about this, and maybe this is not true for everyone because, you know, the graphics are low fidelity, the input, you only have so much input. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is like, you know, you use like high concept or whatever. For me, it is like how relatability, you know, that word I think is still powerful here, which is, well, I fired up the game. It had a title screen. There was only one choice, start game. And then immediately I had a character talking to me. That character had a friend who talked to the character. They talked to each other and I can click on the world. Well, now I'm curious. And by limiting my possibilities, by limiting the window, it became engaging. And so I think like what Fred was talking about is what I see more tripping people up, especially people who are new at game development, is you don't need everything. You really don't need everything. You can do so much with so little. And even though like I think about like MUDs, I loved MUDs. And I remember being a cranky kid when
Mm-hmm.
MMOs came out, like EverQuest, what? This is just a boring MUD, you know? Like seriously, I was a little petulant child, you know? And I'm just like, MUDs are so much richer. You can have walls of text. These graphics, they can't compete with text. Like seriously, that's real things I said when I was 16 or whatever. But I also look at it and go, well, my like childhood treasure game of all games is Earthbound. And I go, well, I can go back and play Earthbound at any point, but then I also go look at Undertale. Look at games like that. There's a whole, I was not the only person who loved Earthbound. There's a lot of games that like Lisa, you know, that have come out and where the creators are very unabashedly talking about how they love that and they want to go back to it. But you can never really go back anywhere. You're a new creator. You're in a new time and a new place. And so one of the cool things that I think about with our project is a lot of what we're doing wouldn't be the first instinct. And I think actually someone working with said this to someone else yesterday. And he said, if you're making a space game today, your instinct wouldn't be, let's replicate Space War, which
No.
is like what the UQM Masters is doing. But if you do, and we accept that as a conceit and say, wait a minute, the combat is space war. This is how it's going to work. It's top down. The camera works this way. You have these rules for inertia that are kind of unusual and maybe even challenging to control. And if you create something that's interesting and stands out, because there's so many games now, it doesn't matter. It's not like the idea is lost. It's not like the experience is gone. You know, I mean, Lurkon Masters is kept alive by an open source community, and that's great. People can go play it. People are porting it to Android and doing all kinds of stuff and finding their own ways to keep that game alive. But even the idea can find new life, because if someone hasn't done it in a while, all of a sudden it's fresh. If someone remembers it fondly and loves that idea and carries it with them, here comes my sentimentality. It's like, a piece of art is powerful, but the impact it has on other people to create more things is even more powerful and magnifies it. So it never is going to die. It's never going to go away. People are just going to reconjure it, just like language. It's just going to come back out later. If it had value, it had value to someone. They're going to put it back out in the world in a new way, in the context of the current uh, culture, I guess.
Sure. Well, we see so many remakes from Hollywood. Somebody remakes Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I didn't watch it. I have the first one, and that's good. With Gene
Wilder.
Yeah.
Gene Wilder. Thank you. And somebody might make a new Wizard of Oz, but I will always have the first Wizard of Oz, so I won't need a remake. But for someone to go back and really enjoy, born in 2020, to enjoy Wizard of Oz, they might need an actor or someone that they relate to, relatability. And that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, I'm re-energized talking to you guys, because you're reminding me of a bunch of things that I love about this business. And I always enjoy that. I love because I'm telling you, like, time goes by faster and faster and faster. And we've only got a few more moves we can make before somebody's, carting us out. And
Is this the combine again?
What's that?
Is this the farm combine again?
Yeah, well, I mean, like loading us into the back of something and we're not coming home from there. You know what I mean? Like, so we got to take this moment in time and really live it. And I just want to thank you guys for having me on your sort of I guess a podcast that is of promoting your upcoming promoting all of this in a good way, and a really good, and allowing me to kind of also jump in with some stuff too. So
It was our pleasure.
Yeah, seriously, you're the honored guest here. For our community, they get to hear from us all the time, but having you here is you're special. And then I got to fanboy. One more person to check off the list. I got to fanboy a little bit too, so it's self-serving.
Well,
but seriously,
coming to your
thank
house.
you.
That's right, for the $50
for my $50. By the way, you've heard of a concept called net present value of money? You had better get $132 out of your bank machine, because that's what it now will cost you if you want to cleanse your soul. I'm sorry,
but doesn't that money get distributed amongst people? I'll just give you 50 cents.
Everybody goes from 9 cents to 22 cents. Whatever.
Don't worry, you've got yourself a bargain. If you show up here in March, we'll hash it out. Don't worry, I've got a whole legal team ready to figure it out for us.
I'll buy dinner, so it'll all work itself out. Well, I'll tell you guys, thank you. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this. When you guys finish with this, I will post it up on my site. I will do a link, and if you have any other places you want me to post it, I'm absolutely thrilled to help spread the good word on this. And yeah, this is it, man. We're sort of from a generation. I'd say that anyone in this generation who's making games, they need to get on a call, they need to share their stories, and maybe we create a site, like I can hang it off my site, or you guys put it on your site, where we can have a little place where people can go and enjoy some of this and hear some old stories. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah. That's part of what we're doing. You are going into the museum, whether you like it or not. But yeah, we'll be sharing this in the coming months.
We're hoarding these conversations.
So we'll be sharing them in the next coming months, and when it goes out, I'll send you a link, and I'm happy to send you a link to the tools. You can play with that.
Nice.
And I'll just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And